The village was dying. Smoke rose from only a few fires, thin and gray against a sky that promised nothing. Children sat with hollow eyes, their bellies swollen with hunger. The old ones no longer sang. The warriors sat with their heads bowed, stripped not just of their horses, but of their dignity. 200 head had been taken in the night. Every horse the tribe owned, their wealth, their mobility, their very survival. Without them, winter would finish what the bandits had started. A rider appeared on the ridge, a lone figure silhouetted against the setting sun. The villagers watched him descend into the valley, some reaching for weapons they no longer had the strength to use. He was a white man, weathered and lean, with a face that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. He dismounted at the edge of the village and stood waiting, his hands visible, his posture open. He did not need to speak. His presence alone was a question. The chief came forward, an old man with a withered arm and eyes that had witnessed decades of loss. "You are not welcome," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The rider nodded. "I know, but I heard what happened. I came to help." The chief laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "Help? One man against 40 bandits?" The rider did not smile. "I've been alone before. It's not the numbers that matter. It's knowing the land." He was given a place by the fire, not out of trust, but out of the ancient law that no stranger should freeze in the cold. The children crept closer, drawn by the strange man with the quiet voice. He shared his dried meat, dividing it among them until his pack was empty. The mothers watched, suspicious but hungry. The warriors watched, shamed that a stranger fed their young. The chief watched, and in his eyes something flickered, not hope, but curiosity. That night, the rider spoke. He told them of a canyon 3 days' ride to the north, a place the bandits had made their camp. He had seen it weeks ago, scouting, always scouting. "I know the way in," he said. "There's a pass they don't watch. A man could slip in at moonfall." The chief shook his head. "A man would die." The rider looked at the children sleeping against their mothers. "Maybe, but the horses would come back." Dawn came cold and gray. The rider was already saddling his horse when the chief found him. Behind the chief stood 3 young warriors, their faces hard, their hands gripping knives they had sharpened through the night. "They go with you," the chief said. It was not a request. The rider looked at the young men, saw the hunger in their faces, the desperation. "If we die," he said quietly, "the tribe loses more." The chief's withered hand gripped the rider's arm. "If we do nothing, we lose everything." They rode north, 4 men against 40. The warriors spoke little, their eyes scanning the horizon, their hands never far from their weapons. The rider led them through passes and canyons, following a map drawn in memory. On the second night, they heard the bandits before they saw them, drunken laughter, the crack of whips, the terrified whinny of horses. The warriors tensed, their knuckles white. The rider held up a hand. "Wait, not yet." He showed them the canyon from the heights. The bandits' camp spread out below like a stain on the land. 200 horses milled in a makeshift corral, thin and frightened. The bandits sat around fires, their numbers greater than expected. 40 was a lie. There were 60 at least. The youngest warrior whispered, "We cannot." The rider pointed to a narrow cut in the canyon wall, invisible from below. "That's the way. I go alone. You wait here. If I don't come back, you ride home and tell them I tried." He descended into the canyon as the moon slipped behind the clouds. The cut was barely wide enough for a horse, the wall scraping his shoulders. Below, the camp sounds grew louder, shouting, singing, the clink of bottles. He reached the corral and found the horses pressed against the far fence, their eyes rolling white. He spoke to them in a low, steady voice, the way his grandfather had taught him. One by one, they turned toward him. He cut the rope with a knife he had sharpened to a razor's edge. The first strand snapped. The second. The gate fell open, and the horses surged forward not into the camp, but toward him, toward the cut in the wall, as if they knew. He slipped into the gap, the horses following in a silent flood. Behind him, a shout went up, then another. The bandits had seen. He kicked his horse forward, the herd thundering behind him, filling the narrow passage with muscle and fear. The warriors on the heights saw the dark mass pouring from the canyon and knew what had happened. They fired arrows into the passage behind the herd, buying seconds, each second a life. The rider emerged from the cut, his face streaked with blood from a branch that had caught him, his horse lathered and staggering. The herd was with him, 200 horses streaming into the night, running for home. Behind them, the canyon echoed with screams. They rode for 3 days without stopping, pushing the herd through passes and across rivers, the bandits' pursuit fading with each mile. The youngest warrior wept when he saw the familiar valleys, the smoke of the village fires. The rider said nothing, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his body swaying with exhaustion. When they crested the final ridge, the village below erupted. Women ran from their dwellings, children screamed, the old ones wept. The horses were home. The chief stood at the edge of the village as the herd poured into the valley, 200 horses filling the plain with dust and thunder. He watched the rider dismount, watched him stumble, watched him stand. The chief did not smile. He did not weep. He walked forward and stood before the man who had done the impossible. "You have given us back our lives," he said. "There is no payment for such a thing." That night, the village feasted. The bandits' supplies had been divided among the families, and for the first time in months, children went to sleep with full bellies. The rider sat apart from the celebration, his back against a tree, watching the fires. He was not one of them. He had done what he had done because it was right, not because he sought a place among them. The chief found him there, 2 cups in his hands. He offered one and sat beside him in silence. "You carry something," the chief said after a long pause. The rider did not answer. "A weight, a wound. I see it in your eyes." The rider looked into the fire. "I've done things I can't undo." The chief nodded slowly. "We all have. What matters is what we do after." He rose, placing a hand on the rider's shoulder. "Tomorrow, you will see. My people will show you what you have earned." Dawn came, and the rider woke to find the village gathered in a wide circle. At the center stood the chief, and beside him, 20 young women. They were dressed in their finest, their hair braided with feathers and beads, their faces calm and serious. The rider rose slowly, confusion on his face. The chief raised his hand. "These are the daughters of my people. They have no fathers, no brothers. The bandits took them too, in a different way. Now they are free, and they have chosen." One by one, the women stepped forward. Each stopped before the rider, met his eyes, and whispered a single word. He did not understand the language, but he understood the meaning. The chief translated, his voice low. "She says you gave her back her future. She says you are the man she will wait for. She says her hands will work for you. Her heart will hold you. Her children will call you father." 20 women spoke, 20 offers. The rider stood frozen, his face pale, his hands trembling. He looked at the chief, at the women, at the village that watched in silence. "I don't understand," he said. "I only brought back what was stolen." The chief shook his head. "You brought back more than horses. You brought back hope. And when a man gives hope to a people, the people give him whatever he needs to live. These women have chosen you. You may choose one or none. The choice is yours." The rider looked at the women, at their faces, young and old, some with scars, some with eyes that had seen horrors he could only imagine. He looked at the children who had eaten his dried meat, at the warriors who had followed him into death, at the chief who had offered him something he had never dared to want. He stepped forward, not toward any of the women, but toward the center of the circle. "I don't deserve any of this," he said, his voice breaking, "but I will spend every day trying to." He chose none that day, but he did not leave. He built a dwelling at the edge of the village, a small thing of wood and hide, and he stayed. He helped the warriors rebuild. He taught the children to track. He sat with the old ones and listened to their stories. And in the evenings when the fires burned low, one of the women would sit beside him, not speaking, just being there. Different women, different nights. And the chief smiled when he saw it, because he knew a man who had nothing to give but himself would find his way in time. The village had been saved. But the rider was just beginning to live.